Guys, I want to talk to you about mock paper 2, the compare and contrast in-class timed essay on Men We Reaped in Sag Harbor. This is a big one. It's worth 150 summative assessment points, and so I want to make sure that you understand exactly what I'm looking for on this essay. All right, let's talk. First of all, a reminder that we are doing this to prepare for paper 2, which is worth 25% of your total score for IB assessment. And so that's going to be the main reason here why we're working on this. We are going to come back to paper 1. Don't worry, we're going to do that next month. Okay, so a reminder of paper 2, it's 25%, as I just said. There's going to be 4 questions in May. You're going to answer one of them. It's going to be under exam conditions. It will be over at House of Hope Church. You will not be able to use any books, notes, or electronics during the test. And you're going to compare and contrast 2 works. I'm hoping you're going to use Sag Harbor and Men We Reaped because those are the 2 that we are preparing. You're going to use detailed references to the works without the books. So whatever you include in the essays needs to be information that you can memorize. It will be graded on 4 criteria. Knowledge, understanding, and interpretation is worth 10 marks, and so is analysis and evaluation, while C, focus and organization, is worth 5 marks, and D, your use of language, is also worth 5 marks. Okay, we've got some good brainstorming strategies, so when you approach this test in May, you don't know what the questions are going to be. You're going to have 4 different questions. And what I want you to do is to spend some time first brainstorming before you ever start writing the essay by using this DRAT, brainstorming strategy. The D stands for define. You want to define the key subject of the question, like a literary analyst, but also in a way that makes sense to you. And you'll want to make this definition really clear to your assessor right away in your introduction paragraph. Then you're going to want to rewrite the question as you're brainstorming, just to continue to think about what is this question really asking me and how can I stay focused on it. You're going to apply it then to the 2 works that you are going to write about, narrowing and focusing on just this subject that's being asked of you and just those 2 works. And then finally, you're going to tick off all of the ideas that you have. Now, I think it would be smart to do this right now for Sag Harbor, since you haven't done a DRAT yet for Sag Harbor. And so have at it, give it a shot, and see what you can come up with. All right, we're also talking organization for this mock paper 2 essay. And so it's really important that you look carefully at how you're organizing your essay. My suggestion is to use the block style, where we have an introduction where you're focusing on the prompt, defining it, restating it, applying it to the books that you've read. And then you end with the thesis statement in the introduction. And then you focus on just one book where you are connecting it directly to your thesis statement, and you're analyzing, evaluating, and interpreting the book based on the subject from the prompt. Then you move on to the second book. Now, you may have more than 1 paragraph on the first book. In my sample essay that I have in Schoology for you, there are 3 paragraphs for each book. So the first 3 body paragraphs are on book 1, and then the next 3 body paragraphs are on book 2. It just depends how much information you have. And then finally, you're going to have an evaluative paragraph or 2. I don't know, depends again on how much information you have. And in this evaluative paragraph, you are going to look carefully at how the 2 books are similar and different. And you're going to talk about the effects of those similarities and differences on the reader's thoughts and feelings, and then on the ultimate meaning of each book. And so you'll talk about both books in that chunk. Then finally, you'll end with your conclusion, where you restate your thesis statement and you give some quick final thoughts and a wrap up to the essay. A reminder that you're writing about one of 2 prompts for this essay, either the one about the struggle to be understood or the one about universal ideas. All right, let's take a look carefully at the introduction. In your introduction, you want to stay focused on the prompt. And if you notice, this one starts with by definition. So right away, they're defining the prompt. A universal truth is a truth that is discernible by anyone or anything in any context. Thus, no matter where a person has been or how they have been brought up, every human being shares some sort of universal truth with one another, whether it is something as simple as everyone needs oxygen to breathe, or a truth that contains more complexities. So this is really all about the prompt, and that is appropriate. And now we have the thesis statement. In The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, the universal truth of every human carrying the trauma of the past is shown through symbolism and imagery, while in Men We Reaped by Jesmyn Ward, the universal struggle of finding one's voice is shown through the motif of silence versus speech. So that works great. And now we have our middle paragraphs. And the first paragraph in the body paragraphs is going to be on the first book. And in this essay, they're writing about the things they carried first. And so if they could fit all of this in one paragraph, they might. But they might tackle these different things in 3 different paragraphs based on how much information they have. And so you might have 1 paragraph on book 1, or you might have 2, or you might have 3. It's totally up to you. But you'll want a main point for each that is supporting your main claim from your thesis statement. And then you're going to want details, and you're going to want to analyze, evaluate, and interpret these details. And getting as specific, as precise as you can. Memorized quotes are always impressive to assessors too, if you can do it. Okay, the second book then, you're going to do the same thing, right? You're going to keep looking at just the book at hand. We already did The Things They Carried, so now we're moving just to Men We Reaped. And we're going to argue this point about the universal struggle of finding one's voice. And the student has done it in 3 main points. And maybe they have enough to make 3 paragraphs like the sample essay that's in Schoology, or maybe they'll have 2, maybe they'll have 1. Okay, so after they've dealt with The Things They Carried exclusively, and then Men We Reaped exclusively, then they're going to be talking about comparisons and contrasts in the evaluative paragraph. And so that looks something like this. It's a paragraph where you evaluate the comparison and contrasts between these 2 works. And so here's their main point of this paragraph. Both books focus on grief and loss, but have different takes on how to deal with it. And then they've got several details here on both works. And if you look at the sample essay, the evaluation is looking at how they're similar and how they're different, and ultimately what messages these books are creating because of that. And so you can take it wherever it leads you. The one thing that IB consistently says not to do is to not generalize, to make comparisons. Let the books be what they are. They're complicated, sophisticated selves. And don't try to boil them down to some grand comparison, because that is just missing all those subtleties and complexities that IB wants you to focus on. All right, so then we get to the conclusion. This is the shortest paragraph of your essay. I've got the whole paragraph here. It's just in conclusion, through symbolism, imagery, and motif, the things they carried and Men We Reap deal with the universal struggles humans face after losing people who are close to them. Both books go beyond the specifics of place and time to convey the universal ideas that everyone carries something from the traumas in their lives, and everyone struggles to find their voice at times. After reading these 2 works, we are left with the feeling that there is hope after trauma if we just listen to the stories closely enough. And so this is your one chance to be a little bit creative. I got the we pronoun in there to kind of shake things up a little bit. All right, what are the specific rules for the mock paper 2 exam in class? You are going to pick one of the 2 prompts. You are going to prepare ahead of time, hopefully by doing DRAT and a block method outline. The essay itself is 2 days and 90 minutes total. You're going to handwrite this in class using blue or black ink on every other line and just one side of a page of paper. I will provide loose leaf paper and blue or black ink pens, so don't worry about that. You may use your book, you may use your packets, you may use an outline or any print materials that you have that you've used to prepare for the essay, okay? But you may not use electronics. So I'm going to make you put your phones away and keep them away. I don't want you looking up spellings. I just want you to do your best. And I don't want you to use your Chromebook. So no electronics whatsoever. It's going to be worth 150 summative assessment points, and it will be graded on all 4 criteria. A reminder when we're looking at analyzing, evaluating, and interpreting literature, we always start with authorial choices first. And that is stuff like diction, imagery, tone, structure, atmosphere, the little itty-bitty things. And then we look at breaking these down. And when you're doing a paper 2, you're going to want to try to find an example of a pattern of authorial choices, a particular motif, a particular structure. And find an example from the beginning, the middle, and the end of the book works really well. Break each example down. You don't want a long quotation because remember, you're not going to have the book with you when you write this paper 2 exam in May. And instead, just describe the example as carefully as you can. Pull it apart, explain what makes it interesting in literary terms. And then you're going to look at the effects by evaluating each example. What thoughts are created for the reader? What feelings are created for the reader? And then finally, you're going to get to the interpretation. And this is where you look at the meaning that is created through the use of these authorial choices and their effects on the reader. So criterion A is knowledge, understanding, and interpretation. This one is worth 10 marks. And the rubric asks you how much knowledge and understanding of the works does the candidate show. So do you have an example from the beginning, the middle, and end of each work? Do you have specific details like proper nouns and other precise textual information? Are you focused on answering the prompt? Are you making valid claims, not just claims, but actual valid claims? And are you coming up with some rich ideas having to do with theme and meaning? To what extent does the candidate make use of knowledge and understanding of the works to draw conclusions about their similarities and differences in relation to the question? You got to be using textual evidence to do that, the best examples. All right, criterion B is analysis and evaluation. To what extent does the candidate analyze and evaluate how the choices of language, technique, and style and or broader authorial choices shape meaning? This is another 10-pointer. So for this one, it's all about this stuff. Use your packet to help you and use the notes, the class notes in Schoology where we jigsawed. You have to be dealing with this. If you don't do any analysis and evaluation, you're not going to get more than a 1 for criterion B, and it's 10 marks, folks. All right, so how do we do this in a paper 2 essay? How do we analyze and evaluate when we're not going to have long quotes like this? Well, let me give you a sample. This comes from one of your classmates. And the sample of the literary aspect that they're talking about, the literary aspect is silence versus speech motif. And this is the sample that they talk about in their first body paragraph on Men We Read. And it comes from the chapter We Are Learning, I believe, and on page 92 and 93 in Men We Read. Excuse me, it's from We Are Wounded. And so this is Ward talking about her father's motorcycle. And she says, sometimes my father strapped us to the back of it, yada, yada, yada. And then if you look next, she says, sometimes I think I should have known he was trying to tell me something. Something like, and now in italics, I am a man, I am young and handsome and alive, and I want to be free, but I did not. So this is the example that they're talking about, but in their essay, they're not going to use a long quotation. So take a look at what they do instead. Here's the paragraph. Ward first uses the motif of silence versus speech to understand and communicate the issues of misogyny and dissolving families that are common in her community. Now, it's important first to note that she's got the literary aspect here, right? And then she's got the language from the prompt to understand and communicate. The student is really using to be understood as a way to communicate. And then as far as larger ideas go, we've got the issues of misogyny and dissolving families. So that's a larger idea. Whoops, it didn't circle it very well. That are common in our community. Okay, so now here's her example. When Ward is young, her father buys a motorcycle with money Ward's mother wants him to save, which upsets her. Ward thinks that through the action of purchasing the motorcycle, though he does not say it out loud, her father is trying to prove his freedom and independence as a man. Ward comes to the conclusion that due to societal racism, men in her community try to be valued in society but often are not, and therefore turn to abusing the power they have in the home to make up for it. Okay, so up here, this is where she's talking about the sample that we just saw in the page prior, right? The example of, the motorcycle. Though he does not say it out loud, her father is trying to prove his freedom and independence as a man. So she's basically summarized the example that we see here, right? So she doesn't have the actual quote, but she has summarized it with some very specific details. The fact that he doesn't say this out loud, but that Ward thinks he is trying to say this. And that it specifically has to do with the motorcycle and being free as a man. Okay, so that is how we do it, you guys. And then she moves on to evaluation by saying, and interpretation by saying how Ward comes to the conclusion that it's societal racism. This trend of trying to prove independence by doing things that hurt their families, such as spending money on things not good for the family and having affairs, like Ward's father, lead to history continuously being repeated in Ward's community. The majority of people she knows come from families where the parents are not together anymore. All right, so this is an example or an excellent paragraph to use as an example of one of your body paragraphs in response to prompt 2 on Men We Reaped. All right, criterion C is something I'm also grading this time around. It's worth 5 marks, and it's your focus and organization. If you follow the outline, you'll do just fine. You just have to make sure that you've got this stuff here. How well structured, balanced, and focused is the presentation of ideas. You're focusing on the prompt. Be careful with that. Come back to the language of the question over and over. The struggle to be understood. Oh, I said that last example was about prompt 2, but it's actually about prompt 1, isn't it? It's about the struggle to be understood. Or is it about universal ideas, which is what the second prompt is about? Do you use the block method or point-by-point method of comparison contrast? Do you have a clear thesis statement that uses language from the prompt, a debatable assertion that gets at the overall meaning of the book and answers the question, and a literary aspect connected to your assertion? Well, here's a sample, and this is from the sample essay that's typed and linked to the summative assessment assignment. And you can see that we have those 3 pieces, don't we? And the things they carry by Tim O'Brien, the universal truth, there's language from the prompt, of every human carrying the trauma of the past. There's the meaning. It's shown through symbolism and imagery. There's the literary aspect. And now we've got the second work. Well, in Men We Reaped by Jesmond Ward, the universal struggle of finding one's voice is shown through the motif of silence versus speech. All right, the parallel structure of the thesis statement works well too, going in the same order. So we've got title, author, prompt, meaning, literary aspect. Title, author, prompt, meaning, literary aspect. All right, so use that block style to help you stay organized as you write your essay. I'm also grading 5 marks on criterion D, and this is how clear, varied, and accurate is the language. Here are some tips for you. Be concise, not flowery. Don't feel like you have to use big words, all right? Just be clear and say it in as few words as possible. Be direct, not creative in your writing. The author's works are more important than your own writing in a literary analysis. So you want to spend more time talking about their writing and not as much time working on creating flowery, long sentences for yourself. You want no errors. Okay, so all the little nitpicky things I'm looking at punctuation, capitalization, spelling, fragments and run-ons, all of these good things. And then the other thing to look at, how appropriate is the choice of register and style? So that you want to be formal and academic. So no I's or you's, my's, yours, personal pronouns. And you want to write as a literary analyst, not as Michelle Cope, right? You're this sort of disembodied figurehead making points about the text, and instead of making it really personal. All right, make sure you underline the titles of books, and then also use the literary present tense. So Ward uses instead of used. See that there? Uses. And when Ward is young. So even though she's not currently young, it feels weird, right, to have that in present tense. But that's what we do with literary analysis. It's called the literary present tense. So buys, wants, upsets. These are all in the present tense, and that's what you want to do as well in your essay. All right, I hope this was helpful, and I really want you guys to all kick this Paper 2's butt and get an A, so good luck to you. Please show me thesis statements, outlines as needed. Let me know what I can do to help you. Feel free to email me. I'm here for you. I want to support you. I want you to do well. Best wishes as you do this.